they froze them. Well, I'll repeat that they froze them in one giant time lasso from tying it end to end. So the zombifoids were frozen, and the king lizard had been knocked out, and his control panel destroyed, and the doctor and Sally were rescued, and all the Doctor Who's were shaking each other's hand and congratulating each other, and Darth and Joe became visible again. And the eighth Doctor Who had been frozen, used his time lasso to lasso the Lizard King, and they took them all off into the TARDIS. But there were so many dinosaurs outside, they were afraid that the dinosaurs would eat the zombifoids, and even though they thought that maybe that's what they deserved, that's not really the way they should handle things. They should probably let them get captured and taken off to prison. So they decided to distract the dinosaurs somehow, and the Doctor projected a hologram of himself on the other side of the TARDIS. So the dinosaurs started walking toward that hologram, and the other Doctor Who started sneaking toward the TARDIS, but then the dinosaurs smelled them all, and they started running toward them, and they were just about to eat them when the last zombifoids were pushed onto the TARDIS, and the TARDIS took off just in time, just when it was about to be eaten. In fact, a giant pterodactyl creature bit, but not a regular pterodactyl, but one of these evil dinosaur pterodactyls wearing a uniform, bit the bottom of the TARDIS, but it managed to go backwards in time to before the bird took off and escaped that way. And they brought all the Darth and Joes and Doctor Who's and Sally's to the correct time, and they dropped off the zombifoids and the King Lizard to prison. And that is the end of that short Darth and Joe story. The end. Once upon a time, when Darth was 10 and Joe was 8. It was once iguana time, as a matter of fact. Anyway, the little brother Ben by this time... There are. In fact, their house was surrounded by iguanas, which was very unusual. Their little brother Ben was 2 years old when Joe was 8 and Darth was 10. And they were babysitting. And it was getting late. It was time to go to bed, and it was time to take Ben to bed, because they had to go to bed too, because their mom wasn't home. Where was she? She was out shopping because they needed to buy new beds, because they had all grown so big they grew out of their old beds. Well, Darth said, Joe can build us new beds in the laboratory downstairs. But his mom said, no, we're gonna buy nice long beds for all you boys. And then they said, well, can't Ben just sleep in Joe's bed and Joe sleep in Darth's bed, and then just make one new bed? And she said, okay, we're gonna make one new bed. Now Ben started hammering on things, and then he threw the hammer away, and that started attracting some little critters outside. Made scritchety scratchy sounds like this. Did you hear that? You hear that sound? Ben heard the sound too. What is that? Joe looked out the window. You know what he saw? Iguanas. He saw one iguana, then he saw another, then he saw 500 iguanas. Pretty soon he thought he saw about 3 million iguanas. Uh-oh, iguanas. What do you mean, uh-oh? There's nothing wrong with iguanas, said Darth. Well, there's nothing wrong with 12 or 15 iguanas, maybe, but look outside. And Darth looked outside the window, and as far as he could see, 3 foot deep, iguanas, crawling, walking everywhere on the side of the house, looking at him through the window. Mm-hmm. He looked out the window, and the iguana was looking right in his face. Wark, wark, wark. They made little sounds like that. Wark, wark, wark. And instantly, Joe and Darth figured they had to communicate with them. They were gooks, so they could communicate with iguanas. What's going on? And the iguana was saying, nice day, isn't it? No, I mean, why are there so many iguanas here? Why are there so many humans? Huh? I see 3 humans. That's more than I usually see inside a house when it's empty. Our house isn't empty. It's empty of iguanas. Can we come in? No, there are too many of you. But suddenly, Ben started just pulling on Darth's hair, and Darth said, ow. And the iguana said, oh, we can stop that. Let us in. We'll help take care of Ben. And so Darth said, okay, if you promise to help take care of this little guy. And so Darth opened the window, and about 24 iguanas poured in, and they pushed Ben away from, they grabbed his arms, and they pulled him away from Darth, and Ben had a clump of Darth's hair. And he was walking around Darth, and then they said, Ben, it's time for you to sit down. And Ben sat down. Now listen to this story. And Darth and Joe started telling Ben a good night story, and all the iguanas were listening. They sat around and they were interested in the story too. But Ben wouldn't sit still. He was walking around in a circle. And so they decided to tell him the story anyway, and maybe it would make him tired. Don't pull Darth's hair. Ow! Said Joe, because he was also pulling Joe's hair. It's very bad to pull people's hair, Ben. It hurts. Okay? So they started telling the story about how a little brother one day was pulling his big brother's hair. Both he had in their story, the little brother's name was Jack, and the big brother's name were Fred and George, exactly.
Weasley.
George Weasley.
Fred and George Weasley.
Were Fred and George Weasley.
They were twins.
And they were twins. Wait a minute, this sounds awfully familiar. And Jack was pulling their hair, and they kept telling him, don't pull our hair.
Ron.
Don't. Rod?
Ron.
Ron was pulling their hair. And they said, you'd better not pull our hair. You better not pull our hair. But Ron thought it was funny and kept pulling. So they decided to cast a little spell on Ron.
But they don't know.
But guess what?
Way to cast a spell because
You can't cast a spell because they didn't have any magic wands.
And there was no such thing as a spell.
And there was no such thing as a spell. They decided to trick Ron into thinking that they were casting a spell. And so Ron said, nah! And he tried to push them into some spider webbing. He wanted them to get up. And they said, Ron, we are turning you into an iguana. And Ron thought that he had turned into an iguana. You know why? Because they had a pet iguana, and all the iguanas were really paying attention at this time. And they said, look at yourself in the mirror, Ron. And he looked in the mirror, but they had taken out the glass. And on the other side was an iguana. And Ron stood up, and the iguana stood up. And Ron waved his left hand, and the iguana raised, well, his right hand, so it would be mirror opposite. And everything that Ron did, the iguana did. Ron did a little dance, and the iguana did a little dance. And Ron said, ha ha ha, iguana, which means, wow, you've turned me into an iguana. That's cool. Which wasn't really the effect they were hoping for, but at least it stopped them, it distracted enough from pulling their hair.
Why did he say,
because he thought it was funny.
But Dad!
Yes?
The little brother wasn't named Ron.
No, not Darth and Joe. This is the story that Darth and Joe is telling the iguanas and Ben. And so the moral of the story, Ben, they said to Ben, was that if you pull your brother's hair, you'll be turned into an iguana.
This is funny. Don't make it too funny. Then my head will pop off.
Who said that? And they turned around, and it was Joe, except Joe wasn't Joe. Joe was a robot. Hey, you're a robot. And Joe said, yes?
Joe is on outside.
The real Joe was outside with all the iguanas communicating with them. But the robot Joe was saying, my head is in danger of falling off. Stop with the humor. Stop with the humor. Yes, you are very close to exploding my head. And Darth couldn't help himself. He decided he just had to test that theory once and for all. And you know what he said? He said, why? He said, why is 6 afraid of 7? Do not tell me, do not tell me, because 7, 8, 9. And a whole bunch of the iguanas started laughing. They didn't really understand it because it was in English, but they thought it was a joke, so they started laughing. And meanwhile, Ben was sticking Darth's Joe into a green tube. But Darth was so busy telling a story to try to make the robot Joe explode that he didn't pay any attention to the fact that Ben was making him put his fingers into a green tube. Well, Darth decided to tell one more story to make the robot Joe explode. And he said, okay, this is a story This is a story that a human named Zadie once told me. He said that I used to always buy my lunch at the gas station, but I stopped after a while because they just gave me gas when I ate there. Get it? Gas! The food gave me gas, but I said they gave me gas. And the robot said, that is not funny, my head will not explode. I have to think of another funny story. And while he was thinking, suddenly he noticed that his fingers were completely stuck inside of the green tube. Hey, I can't get my finger out. Hey, my finger's stuck. Hey! And Ben started laughing. Laugh, Ben, laugh. Well, it just sounded like a sigh. And pretty soon the iguanas were laughing in iguana language. And the Joe robot said, that is too funny, must not laugh, must not laugh. And the robot Joe exploded. And Joe ran into the room, being careful not to trip over any iguanas. Said, what happened? Well, the robot version of you exploded. Robot? I built that robot down in the basement. How did it get up here? Sorry, said the iguanas. We thought it was another human and it should come up and get something to eat, so we just helped it upstairs. You must have said something pretty funny. No, my fingers were just stuck in this green tube, said Darth. Can you get them out? Where'd that green tube come from? It says something on it. I can't quite make it out. It says hogwimple, hogtropple, hogswample.
Hogswapple.
Hogswapple. No. It says property of Hogwarts. What? Let me see that. How did that get here? Hogwarts is on the Jedi training planet. I don't know. It must have been maybe when we visited that one time. It must have got caught up with our thing. But what is it? It's some sort of green tube. Green. You know, this is the same color as the iguanas. Huh. Let's see that, said one of the iguanas. I can't read it because I'm an iguana. So true, said Darth. Well, all it says is it doesn't say anything else besides property of Hogwarts. But I'm sure that has something to do with all of you iguanas being here all of a sudden. And Darth finally, the baby's so cute. And Darth finally picked up the green tube. He managed to get his fingers out of it. They poured butter into it, and it sort of gurgled for a little bit. Then they cleaned it out. He popped his fingers out, and he looked through it. And although it was a little buttery, he could see that a world totally filled with iguanas. It was in fact, when he looked through the tube, there were iguanas up higher than the trees, about 60 feet deep in just pure iguanas. This is some sort of iguana tube, said Darth. And Joe, the real Joe, of course, said, you're right. This tube, the longer it stays here, the more iguana... But wait a minute, maybe it's... And they looked outside, and suddenly there were 3 times as many iguanas. And Joe said...
There's 9 feet.
9 feet of iguanas, exactly where 3 feet before. Don't look through that tube anymore, Darth. Every time you look through that tube, there are more iguanas. Let's test that theory, said Darth. No! And he looked through there again, and he saw iguanas almost up the sky, and they took it away, and there were iguanas up the trees. They were covering the house. How we can't even get out of our house anymore? And the iguanas were saying, I don't see anything wrong with that. No, seems like a perfectly fine place to me. Nice company. Come on in, iguana. Oh, sure, iguana, come on. And they were calling each other iguana. And there were more and more iguanas the more we looked through the tube. Nobody looked through the tube. Well, who looked through the tube to begin with? And the iguanas said, well, we found the tube downstairs with your robot friend. And Joe said, the robot, it must have looked through the tube. I gave it a very sophisticated visual module so that it would emulate the exact way that humans see. I was trying to build a perfect robot of myself, except I had this problem that it would explode every time I told it a joke. That this was the perfect one, and you exploded it. Well, your robot friend who's now exploded, at least his head has exploded, has given us quite a problem with these iguanas. We're going to have to do something, and I don't know what to do. We're going to have to take this back to Hogwarts. Well, that's great, but how do we get out of here? If we open the door, we'll be swamped with iguanas. We'd have to swim through them. Well, we can still transport. Good thinking. So they transported to the Jedi training planet, bringing the tube with them. Well, they did. They walked up to Hogwarts, and there was a rustling when they were getting close, they heard this rustling sound, and pretty soon they looked down. There was a huge shadow blocking them. It's like the sun had been blocked out. And they looked up, and there was a giant, and he was really hairy. And they said, "What? I don't remember you. And do you have something to do with Hogwarts?" And he says, "My name is Hagrid, and I have a lot to do with Hogwarts. What can I do for you two? And what do you want here?" "Well, we found this." He said, "Property of Hogwarts."
Hogwarts looks like a big...
Castle?
No. For somebody who isn't a wizard, it looks like a big ruined with...
Ruins?
Yeah, with a sign that says danger.
Right, and that's all they saw there. And they said, "Gosh, we must have come too late. It looks like they left here about 3 million years ago." No. Let me see that thing. Let me see that thing. And he had a very gruff voice. He was a very large man. And he said, this end, I can't, I'll tell you what, I'll take it back with me and I'll ask a friend of mine, and he'll know what to do. You guys wait right here. And the big giant guy walked away, and they didn't see where he went. Suddenly he wasn't there anymore. And he came from behind the other way, and there he was again, They said to look through it the other way, and the problem should go away. So Darth and Joe, with that, they transported back to their planet, and they looked through, and they only saw about tree height of iguanas, and when they looked through, the iguanas were lower, and then Joe said, "Let me see," and he looked through, and there were only about 3 feet of iguanas, and the iguanas were saying, "Bye, see you later." And Darth looked through, and suddenly there were no more iguanas. When he took it away, there were no more iguanas, except for one, which ran away. They thought, well, that's probably not too bad to have one iguana left. And they went into town, and there were people were coming out of the houses, and they were saying, "What? We were covered with green lizards." "Iguanas," said Darth and Joe. "Whatever? What happened to them?" "They're gone now. Don't worry about it. We saved the day yet again." "What caused the problem?" Well, we did. Sorry." Darth and Joe said. "But we saved the day nonetheless." "Yeah, okay." They were used to Darth and Joe saving their planet, so they weren't too upset. And Darth and Joe decided that they would keep the green tube until they had a chance to return it to a real wizard, but they would they placed it inside a box in Joe's laboratory so they could be careful they would never accidentally get opened up and used again. Besides, they didn't know if it was only an iguana creating tube or what other powers it had. And that was called Day of the Iguanas. The end. All right, well, a short one. Once upon a time, Darth and Joe were sitting in the living room in their house, and Joe got up and said, "Oh, my legs fell asleep." And Darth said, "Oh, I can't feel my legs at all. They must have really fallen asleep." And Joe was saying, "Oh, mine's are real tingly." And Joe was sort of walking like this, sort of staggering around. And Darth got out, but Darth didn't walk at all. He fell right to the ground. He had no legs. "Hey, this is really bad," said Darth. "My legs never fallen asleep this much. I don't even have legs anymore." "Huh," said Joe. "Well, you better not sleep on your arms tonight, or maybe you'll lose your arms too. This is quite serious." And Joe said, "We have to get help. I need some sort of doctor, but not the doctor, because he only deals with time problems. Maybe your legs went back in time." "That doesn't make any sense," said Darth. We certainly need some help. Where are you going?" "I'll be right back. I'm going to get something." "What?" "I'm going to get a sandwich from the kitchen." No, we need to solve this problem now," said Darth. And when Joe came back in the room, Darth only had one arm, a body from the waist up, and a head. "This is serious," said Joe. "You seem to be disappearing right before my eyes." "Well, call some kind of disappearing doctor." "Oh, I don't know
Dimension Lord?
What's going to happen." "Could it be a dimensional problem?" And
His body parts are going to another dimension.
he quickly called up, Joe quickly called up Dr. What and explained the problem to Dr. What over the the intergalactic communicator. And Dr. What said, yes, well, let me walk over to Darth, he said, and he was still on the phone. Now, you say that he has a torso, the main part of his body, a head, no legs, and one arm. Well, one half of an arm, really, said Joe, just from the elbow up. I see. Now, wait about 3 seconds. Now, is the arm still there at all? Nope. Now it's just pretty much Darth's head and his chest. Yes. Okay. I want you to do something very important. Do you have a penny or some kind of metallic coin? Yes. Toss it right at where Darth's stomach used to be. Floop. Hey, it disappeared. Exactly. I'll be there in a minute, and I'm going to bring a friend of mine. And actually, he wasn't there in a minute. That was just a Time Lord way of saying he'd be there pretty soon. He was there in exactly 13 seconds with a friend. The friend's name was Dr. Rhubarb. Dr. Rhubarb is, and Dr. What explained, a dimensional lord. Oh, good, said Darth. You can help save Darth. Said Joe, you can help save Darth's nose. It's still here. And the dimensional lord said, fascinating. And he took out a device, or actually Dr. What took it out, and handed it to Dr. Rhubarb, who looked at it, and he aimed it right at where Darth's stomach used to be. Hold still, they said at Darth. Now don't go anywhere. But Darth's nose was already gone, and Darth was completely gone. And Joe said, wow, he's not there. Don't touch that space. But he's not there. Don't touch that. Pull your hand back. We have to follow the path. What path? The dimensional path. Now, Darth did not leave enough of a trail, since he was made out of flesh, but you tossed a metallic coin in, and that leaves an electrolysis trail through dimensions, and I am picking up the 15th dimension, said Dr. Rhubarb. That's quite a jump. And it looks like he went through the 13th dimension to get there. 13? 15? I wouldn't be surprised. Yep, he's in the 17th dimension. We have no time to waste. And Dr. What said, there's no time like the present. And Dr. Rhubarb said, time enough for... And Joe said, oh, look, I don't want to hear all your time expressions. Let's just go get Darth. He's in trouble. He needs our help.
Dr. Rhubarb doesn't know as many time expressions.
That's a good thing that Joe interrupted him. He was trying to think of a dimension expression. So he kept thinking, I wonder what I could have said. Space, something about space. There's space enough for all that No, let's just go going. And so they got into Dr. What's TARDIS, and inside of Dr. What's TARDIS was Dr. Rhubarb's Artiste. An Artiste is a dimensional TARDIS. And
in Pig Latin.
Well, it translates the TARDIS in Pig Latin. The dimensional lords are really into Pig Latin.
And there's a lot of pigs on the outside.
Yes, it's painted with pigs on the outside. That's one of the hints that they use Pig Latin in Dimensional Lord talk. So they got inside of it, and they, after Dr. What flew the TARDIS up into space, and then Dr. Rhubarb took them in his Artiste, which was very artistic because it was an Artiste, to the 13th, 15th, and then 17th dimensions. And he said, listen, Joe, and you, Dr. What, it'll be a little confusing when we get out. That's why I want you to hold this string. And he tied a string around Dr. What's waist, and then that string was tied around Joe's waist. And he held on to the loop at the end of the string. Let's go. And they stepped outside. Suddenly, everything was very confusing because they were in the 17th dimension. So when Joe tried to step forward, he actually went up. And then the doctor said, are you up there, Joe? And Joe said, no, I'm down here. And he was looking at the inside of Dr. What's foot. And it was all very confusing because the 17th dimension does not look like this dimension. You know, if I want to go to that bed, all I have to do was step, hop. But in the 17th dimension, I have to jump up and back and then twist around 3.5 times and bend over that way, and I would end up from underneath coming through the bed into the inside out part of it, and I'd end up upside down on it. It's very complicated, and that's why you have to study a lot to become a dimensional lord. Don't fool around with dimensions unless you're an expert at it. That's what the dimensional lords try to tell people. So, excuse me, they said, well, which way should we go, said Joe, because there's this monster, and Dr. What said, it's over there, and Joe said, yeah, shoot, it's getting farther from us, don't worry. And Dr. Rhubarb said, no, no, no. It looks like it's getting farther to you. You're not used to the 17th dimension. It's very close to us, and it's about to grab us. Ah! And Dr. Watt and Joe started running, and they were attached with a string, but they pulled out of Dr. Rhubarb's hand with a string, and they started running down the street, except they were running into a wall. And they fell down, which was up, and they ended up on the ceiling, and the monster, which was a giant green toad frog, the monster lurched forward, and it swallowed them, both of them whole. Well, luckily, giant green toad frogs have no teeth. And furthermore, although it was a 17th dimension monster, Dr. Rhubarb knew that he could get them out because he just went to the 19th dimension, reached down inside the monster from the inside out, pulled them out, went back to the 17th dimension, kicked the monster's butt, and it ran away. And so now he said, listen, don't try that again. If you see something running away from you, meaning that it's getting closer, just tell me, and I'll be sure to take you away from it. Don't run away from me, or especially don't run toward me, because you'll end up standing on my face, and I hate it when people do that. And they said, okay. Hey, look, there's Darth. And Joe started running, and he landed on Dr. Rhubarb's face. I think I told you not to do that. Took Joe's foot off his face. Darth, what's going on? Oh, I don't know, but this is awfully confusing. But I stayed right here, just like you said. Well, don't stay right there, said Dr. Rhubarb. You're going to be boiled alive. Huh? No, don't run. Boom, and Darth ran into a wall. It's very... What do you want me to do? Should I transport? No. Don't try transporting in the 17th dimension. You really don't want to end up inside a telephone pole. Let me just walk over there. Okay, guys, follow me here. Now, luckily, Dr. Watt's time techniques can still work in the 17th dimension because time continues to flow normally. Who sucked me up here? I think I know exactly, and it wasn't who, said Dr. Rhubarb. It was a dimensional lord who works for the new improved Trioculus, because we have been tracking him, and Trioculus has this guy working for him called Smortov. Smortov is a crazy dimensional lord who wants nothing more than to eat people from the third dimension. For some reason he developed a taste for third dimensional food, and he thinks that people would taste good. We've got to stop him, but we first have to stop him by getting Darth out of that tube he's in, because that is a boiling tube, and as soon as the temperature gets high enough, he's going to start boiling. Why did he pick Darth? Is it because of Trioculus? Yes, Trioculus couldn't get Darth on his own, so he found this bad dimensional lord to capture Darth, and Darth would have no defense from being sucked into the 17th dimension. First of all, we have to destroy his dimensional suckling machine after we pull the plug here. And Doctor, if you could just aim your time lasso, see that man with his back to you? Throw your time lasso behind you and down to your right. And the doctor said, okay. And the time lasso lassoed around this guy. And he froze in time. And that was the evil dimensional lord, Smornov, as his name was very close to being pronounced. And now that they captured him...
Close to be called s'mores.
Yes, very close to that sometimes. And so Darth, meanwhile, Dr. Rhubarb smashed the glass. They got Darth out. They destroyed Darth and Joe. He explained to Darth and Joe exactly where to aim their lightsabers away from. And they said, now throw your lightsaber at yourself. And they said, what? That'll chop us in half. No, trust me. And they went like this, but their arm was really, they thought they were aiming it toward themselves, but it was really aiming it to the right of each of them, and it smashed into the boiling machine. So they blew that up. And then they also destroyed the dimensional sucking machine. Now, they took the evil dimensional lord back with them into the artiste of Dr. Rhubarb so that he could go to dimensional prison, which is the only place really to effectively hold dimensional lords. And then they had to find Trioculus. And by the way, Darth picked up the penny. Well, he saw the penny that Joe had thrown in there, and he reached for it, but he ended up hitting himself in the eye because he was reaching the wrong direction. It took him about 5 minutes, but eventually he said, oh, never mind. And he reached his hand out to the side. There's the penny. It looks like it's over there, but I'm touching it here. And he grabbed it and he put it in his pocket, which was a little difficult for him to aim for, too, but he just tried to remember, where would my pocket be if it weren't? And he went like that, and there it was. So they got into the artist hay, and they went back to the TARDIS of Dr. What, back in their own dimension, and they decided they had to track down Trioculus to capture him, because this was an incredibly evil plot of Trioculus, and the only way they could capture him was to figure out where he was going to meet the evil dimensional lord after he had eaten Darth. He didn't actually get a chance to taste Darth, luckily. And so, by the way, well, I'll tell you about that later, but first let me say that they found that Dr. Rhubarb took the plans. There was a book left in Smirnov's headquarters, and the book was written in the 17th dimension, so there were some more scattered all around. And the book was written in the 17th dimension, so it was very confusing, how to open it and read it. But he said 3 p.m., Planet of the Scorplops, Cafe Blimpop. So they went there because Planet of the Scorplops is a pretty famous place. Cafe Blimpop was a place where a lot of criminals go. It's a great place to catch criminals if you want to. And sure enough, the new improved Trioculus walked in, and the rest of them, Rhubarb and Darth and Joe and What, pretended they were just eating dinner, just sitting down at a table, and they all had disguises on, fake mustaches and fake beards and sunglasses and big wigs. And as soon as Trioculus looked around and he sat down at a table because his evil Time Lord friend wasn't there to meet him. He was supposed to meet him there. Dimension Lord, I mean. And then they, at the other table, Dr. What and Dr. Rhubarb said to the waiter, tell that man that we're going to buy him a rhubarb sandwich. And so the waiter said, this rhubarb sandwich is compliments of the table over there. And Trioculus said, thank you, I think I'll thank them personally. And he walked up to the table over there, and suddenly Darth and Joe and What and Rhubarb jumped up, tore off their disguises, put the disguises on him, so now he had 4 beards and 4 mustaches on his face, and he tripped over backwards, and they tied him up and took him away and put him in jail. And meanwhile, Smirnov, who was in 24th Dimensional, Dimension Lord jail, actually, which was a specially built jail to even keep Dimension Lords in prison, they were training him to learn that actually, quite frankly, s'mores taste a lot better than living human beings. And he had never actually eaten a human being from the 3rd dimension. He had just seen them on TV, and they looked tasty to him. But when they explained the whole thing about how it's really better to eat inanimate objects instead of living creatures, he understood, and he apologized for the whole thing, and he was out of jail in just 17,000 years, which is a very short period of time to be in a dimensional prison for a crime like that. So he was pretty much cured of his evilness, and he never worked with Trioculus again, except as an undercover good guy pretending to be bad as a way to trick Trioculus. That's another story. Okay, and that is the end.
The beginning, I mean. It's the beginning.
Yeah. Once upon Iguana Time Lord, when Darth was 7 and Joe was 5 years old, and they were working on their pit of death, trying to perfect it. In fact, it was close to Darth's 8th birthday. And yes. Yes. That's right. They decided to go into the real pit of death because they ran out of monster ideas on their own, and every once in a while they go into the real pit of death to look for something new because there are so many monsters there. It's a dangerous proposition because those monsters are real. Whatever happens to you can be real in there. And they want to go in and see how the monsters attack, so they want the monsters to find them. They don't want to be invisible. So it's very scary and dangerous work. That's why they usually go alone. This time, unfortunately, they went with Balloompa. Balloompa was somebody they met inside, right when they stepped into the pit of death, stopped the metal clamps from smashing them, and got help from the salt creatures after they gave them some salt and got inside the pit of death. There was this creature who said, monsters that look like humans, and he ran and smashed into a wall and fell down. And they said, what is your name? And he said, no, not what? Balloompa. Balloompa? You're not one of those wait a second, are you a Guancaton? That's right, how did you know? What's a Guancaton? Asked Darth. Don't you remember? Asked Joe. And Darth said, don't you remember Guancatons? They're the creatures who change names all the time.
Was he a boy or girl?
He was a boy. We are not Guancatons anymore. We changed the name of our species, too. The name of our species is Thudbucket. We are Thudbuckets, and my name is Cringe. Oh, why did they call you Cringe? They cringed. Oh, I see. Never mind, said Darth. What are you doing down here in the pit of death? Research! I'm going to find some monsters for Darth and Joe's pit of death and tell them about them. Hey, what a coincidence. We're Darth and Joe, and we're looking for monsters. You want to come along with us? I'd love to. Come on, Thudbucket. We are not Thudbuckets. For your information, we are Strawberry Pickleheads, and my particular name is Smelly Cucumber Breath. See? Yes, we see. Okay, great. Let's go. And they were deep inside the bowels of the pit of death when suddenly something that looked like a giant playing card started walking toward them. It was the Ace of Spades. Oh, I've heard of the Ace of Spades, said Darth. And Nostril Nose said, yes, I've heard of the Ace of Spades. It's a card, right? Yes, but have you ever heard of a monster called the Ace of Spades? Asked Joe. No, but what could it possibly do to us? I'll tell you what I can do to you, said the Ace of Spades. I can reshuffle you. And with that, he turned sideways, and they saw that it wasn't just one card. It was a whole stack of cards, and they were all aces of spades. And they dropped down, and Darth and Joe and Smelly Kneecap were suddenly all separated from each other in between different cards, and the cards were shuffling. Help, we're being reshuffled. And now we will deal you a final blow. And they threw Darth and Joe. They started dealing the cards all around the room, and they dealt the cards, and the cards were flying, and Darth and Joe and Squashed Face smashed into walls and fell down. That was most unpleasant, said Sorefoot. Yes, said Darth. Yes, said Joe. Well, we've discovered another monster.
No Tooth?
Yes, so No Tooth picked up his toothless mouth and put it back in, and they walked down the hall saying, that's a pretty good monster, and it didn't even kill us. Yeah, said Darth. Write that one down. I already have, said Joe. I already have. How come you repeat everything, said Darth. I don't repeat everything, said Joe. I don't repeat everything. But you just did repeat everything. Listen. I don't repeat everything, okay? I don't repeat everything, okay? Wait a minute. I do repeat everything. We know you do repeat everything, said Darth, and Spaghetti Head at the same time that Joe said, I do repeat everything for the second time. What is going on? And they looked around and they saw there was a blue, shiny shape floating near the ceiling, and there was a beam of green light that kept pulsating and beaming down at Joe's head. Clearly that light is affecting your brain in some way, said Joe. I know. This is crazy. And now, I'm repeating everything 3 times. And I can't stop it. We know you can't stop it, and I can't stop it. Let's get out of here, said Joe. All right, said Darth. Oops, now I'm starting. Let's get out of here. And so, Australopithecus and Darth and Joe ran out of the room. Australopithecus is the name of an ancient human who.
But now his name is scared of lights.
He was scared of lights, and because he was scared of, especially of blue and green lights floating from the sky, making him repeat everything many times. And so Darth and Joe and String Cheese Body ran out of the room. But String Cheese Body was very floppy because his body was made out of string cheese, and pieces of himself started flipping off and turning into cheese, and he was leaving a trail of cheese, and these giant rats were chasing him and eating the cheese. "You have to turn into something else, Cheese Man," said Joe. I don't call me Cheese Man. My name is Rolling Tomato." Vroom, 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 vroom. And Rolling Tomato was going down faster than Darth and Joe, and so they jumped on top of him, and they tried to balance on him, and they were rolling and rolling, and Darth and Joe got hit in the head by a low ceiling when they went through the doorway, and Rolling Tomato kept going, whoosh, and he fell down, splat. And Splat Tomato said, "Ow, my tomato seeds." And Darth and Joe were hanging from a bar near the ceiling, and they said, "We better not drop down there. Let's transport," said Joe. Right, and they let go, and they tried to transport, but the transportation device wasn't working because of some sort of field, energy field, and they fell. "Ah, don't land on me, I'm just a large pillow," with the stuffing all smashed out. And Stuffingless Pillow, who was a very flimsy pillowcase-looking type of guy, stood up and brushed himself off, and Darth and Joe and Melonhead looked around to see...
He had a melon on his head.
That's
Why
right.
doesn't he change his name to Regular Human?
And Regular Human was just fine until he walked into a wall and he was smashed human face. And he said, "Ow, my smashed human face." I'm going to call your species Dumb Species," said Joe. "Good name. From now on, we're called Dumb Species." Wait, did I just put my foot in my mouth? Oh, I did. Whoa.
You lost in my face.
Foot in my mouth. That's what you can call me now. So foot in his mouth, and Darth and Joe,
Put in my mouth.
in my mouth, hopped out of the room and walked out of the room until they saw the golden elevator shaft. Hey, that sounds pretty good. And they
Don't get in there! Don't get in there! There might be a trap.
yelled somebody they didn't know, but it turned out it was a goblin. "Hey, don't goblins always lie?" "They sure do. Let's go in there and see what happens." And they got into the golden elevator shaft, and whoosh, they flew up 30 floors. That was very disconcerting, and suddenly they were in a tiny room with tiny people writing on tiny pieces of paper. "What are you all writing?" "We're all writing ways of killing people who come into the pit of death. We're the thinkers." "What?" "We think up all the cool ideas, ways of destroying people. That's what they pay us to do." "That's what who pays you to do?" "No, we haven't seen who in years when he attacked us once." "But what's the name of the person?" "No, not what." Okay. Cut with all the linguistic stuff. Tell us the name of the person you work for." "Why, Trioculus, of course." "I should have known," said Joe. "I did know," said Darth. "So did I," said Joe. "Snorful Sneef," said Snobblegook. "Where is this Trioculus right now? We have to arrest him. I mean, killing people is against the law, isn't it?" "That's right," said the people writing the pieces of paper. "We never thought of that. We're going to stop right now and think of ways of trapping Trioculus." "Thanks!" And so they started writing feverishly down on their little pieces of paper, and they came up with an incredible plan that involved creating a giant egg splatter. And they needed a giant egg, and so Giant Egg was his name now, and he walked up to them. "How's this?" And they said, "Great. Sit in this spoon, this giant spoon." They built this contraption, and it flew through the air, and it was aimed exactly to miss all the walls and gates and metal spikes and birds, and it fell right through the ceiling of Trioculus' headquarters and splatted right on him. And Runny Egg rolled to the ground and said, "Aha! I have captured you, Trioculus." Trioculus said, "No egg can capture Trioculus." And Darth and Joe, who were transported in, said, "Oh no, well we can." "Ha! How? By this! Egg paper! Quick!" And the thinkers had created this giant piece of paper that egg goo sticks to, and they stuck it to Trioculus, and he was stuck with the egg goo. Well, most of Runny Egg had run off by that point, and he turned into large hopping foot, and he kicked Trioculus in the butt. Boom! And the Trioculus fell over. "Ow! Where'd that foot come from?" "From me," said Giant Cheese with a smile head man. And they took Trioculus out of the pit of death and called the police and put him in jail. And that is how they finally got Trioculus out of the pit of death. The end.
Wait! What
What?
about the thinkers? They could think of ideas for their own.
For Darth and Joe's pit of death. Darth and Joe like to think of their own ideas, but that's great. The thinkers no longer had any jobs at the old pit of death, so maybe they could think of a way of saving people who accidentally fell into the pit of death.
Why don't they think of ways to destroy them?
And now for the funny
That's another
part.
thing, but they didn't want to kill all the innocent monsters who were just there because they happened to be born monsters, and it was no fault of their own that they happened to be monsters. So all you have to do is think of ways of feeding the monsters without killing anybody. But they're thinkers, they'll think of it. And then some of them moved over to Darth and Joe's pit of death to help them think of ideas for their pit of death too. Okay?
What about squad face?
Squad? Squad face?
No, squash.
Yeah, squashed face turned into boot mouth, and he hopped on his mouth back to his spaceship, and
And you named the spaceship Smelly Spaceship because it turned into a smelly cucumber.
that's right. And his nickname was Worm Face because his face turned into a worm, and he waved goodbye with his face, and he jumped into his spaceship as a giant puddle of poop and flew off. And that was the last they saw of him until the next time they saw him.
Why did the poop fall off? Why did get there?
It's hard to explain why Cucumber Head turns himself into poop sometimes, but they don't have much control of what they... Sometimes they're very good at controlling what they turn into. Other times it's just sort of random. It just happens. Burnt out light bulb one day. Another day they might turn into a ripped pair of socks. It's very hard to
the
say.
next day, well, I know what he turned into a few days ago.
What?
Big boat head.
Really?
And then he went into the water, but people got on his head.
Right. Luckily his head could float until he was sinking boat head, and then he was in real big